conversation I'm really happy to bring you. It's an interview with the artist Mr. Fish. His work has been featured in places like The Village Voice, Harpers Magazine, Truth Dig, the LA Times, and galleries in America. And recently he has had a full-length documentary made about his life called Cartooning from the Deep End. Mr. Fish embodies for me everything I believe art should be. He is unafraid to be left outside of institutions who will not accept his criticisms. He is not afraid to speak truth to power, even if it means he never gains power himself. And he is not afraid to suffer for saying what he thinks, personally, career-wise, or even physically. Mr. Fish has long been, in my opinion, one of the bravest artists working anywhere in the world for saying what he thinks, no matter the consequences. We talk about a variety of themes in this conversation, but one that comes up consistently is satire. I believe for Mr. Fish, or Fish, as I'll just shorten it to throughout the conversation, Fish would say one of his favorite quotes comes from Lenny Bruce. Take away the right to say fuck, and you take away the right to say fuck the government. I like that quote. Why I wanted to talk to Mr. Fish comes from a different brilliant mind, Antonio Gramsci, that the old world is dying, the future has yet to be born, and now is the time of monsters. And I believe Fish's work, better than any other artist I've seen in America, does a great job of bringing these monsters into the light and letting us look in horror and disgust at the current political system that we have. And I think that is something that only an artist can do, illuminate through satire, through insight, the ways in which the systems that we currently follow have led us down a monstrous path, and that we either need to create new worlds or stay in the one we currently have and get devoured by these monsters, or become them ourselves. If you like what we're doing, follow us on social media, or if you're interested in coming to Asia and meeting some of the artists, creatives, scientists, brilliant thinkers who are trying to build new worlds, come and visit us on asiaarttours.com. All right, here's Mr. Fish. Sort of like the first question I had is, I had like a good catalyst. My dad was a criminal defense attorney for public defense, so he was a public defender. Anyone who walked through the door, he would take their case. My mother predominantly worked with sort of poor black and brown defendants in Detroit who needed someone who would work appeal. But, they were still pretty wedded to liberalism in a lot of ways. Voted for Clinton, voted for Obama, and believed all that. And I guess this question is sort of two parts. Did you also sort of have a framework? And then have there been sort of challenges in these really trying times of you sort of saying, look, we can't go back to the way things were. What we have to do is something new. So where did you start? And then how are you trying to continue the project with some of the people who helped you be radical in the first place?
Well, it's a good question, and I don't have anybody in my life that was directly connected with any, formal version of radicalism, in the sense that they were, very politically active or engaging in, public dissent in any traditional way. My family was always just very interested in making the most inappropriate joke at the right time, and we always tried to outdo each other. So that was my formal education as far as radical thinking, because if you grow up trying to make the best joke, then, that's all the practice that I needed. Yeah, so there is that. And, if you grow up in a situation where you're experiencing the elation of joy and the camaraderie of family, all trying to, get to the heart of operating in contempt of bullshit, is really what it was about. So if that's how you engage with the world from a very early age, as you get older, you start to recognize how these things manifest in the real world, and the instinct to deflect and condemn bullshit. The targets go from being pissed off about how shitty the weather is, or how idiotic your uncle or aunt are, to the president and real authority figures and things like that.
How have people tried to control you as you've evolved as an artist? And then along the way, how did people sort of nudge you or let you know that what you were doing was interesting?
Working for publications like the LA Times and Harpers and mainstream publications like that, yes, as I continued with, the radical depiction of power, whatever face it has, it can be very well spoken and intelligent and have a black face like Obama. But to me, it's the same reprehensibility that, George W. Bush had, or just had, I criticized the chair of the presidency. Yes, it did become a situation where I feel like in the United States, more and more, the concept of what it means to be a progressive thinker continues to move to the right. It continues to be softened and hijacked by democratic liberalism. It defangs the whole purpose of trying to have a radical opinion and effective dissent from what is wrong with the world. So it's slowly moving into the Obama administration. I was considered too much, too angry and too dismissive of what the liberal Democrats thought was the right direction as far as moving to what they saw the left and I saw as moving to the right. And the thing that sustained me through all of that is if you talk to artists who engage in this kind of activity, you serve the art first, and you serve your concept of honesty in dealing with these issues. So it's not about trying to figure out how whatever corporation is publishing your work, how to satiate their sense of truth. It's about maintaining your own sense of truth. And I've always been able to recognize that the integrity of my voice is only meaningful if the integrity remains intact. And I think that's why people tend to like what I do, So while I was being turned down and eventually completely blacklisted from many of these publications, my fans would come to my site and know where to find my work outside of these publications and say, thank God that you're still doing what you do. As a result, I tend to be a lone voice in that struggle, at least publicly, but privately, these, people who like my work are as angry and are as blatantly pulsed by what they should be.
As you've evolved as an artist, how have people tried to control you? And then along the way, how did people sort of nudge you or let you know that what you were doing was interesting?
Radical thinking and radical, it's its own language. It's its own version of engaging with the truth. And so therefore, I think it's always going to be there. All right. Now that's one way to look at it. And that's why it's sort of complicated, because it depends what day you ask that question. There'll be days where I'm absolutely convinced that we're doomed. Control of their lives is becoming so pervasive that it's going to be impossible to untangle it and then express humanitarianism in any real meaningful way. And there's other days when, because of the people that I engage with, there is this feeling of like, all right, if corporations and power hijack platforms of artistic, expression, there's always walls. There's always smaller ways to organize and get into the streets and circulate underground newspapers, placards, broadsheets. It's like I said, it's been going on for quite a while. I would be too arrogant to try to answer that in a way. I'm very present centered to a fault, so every single day I wake up with a great deal of joy and optimism that things will get better. And it's only based on my mood, and it's only based on that I'm able to create the stuff that I create, and people are responding to it. So I'm very excited by that. And that's all I can do.
I'm sure you've been offered tons of marketing opportunities, licensing opportunities. Um, what were some of the temptations that you've had to go through in terms of maintaining your integrity and or whatever your personal philosophy was to turn down some of those opportunities, and for people who are struggling and then all of a sudden are given a chance to be adopted into sort of power, what lessons from your own experiences would you just say as either cautionary tales or just things to consider?
I started cartooning as a profession, I guess you could say, right when my daughters were born. Previous to that, I've always done cartoons, and I've been in print since 1990. But that said, because I was also doing music, I was doing a lot of writing, I was doing all these things. There were some years between 1990 and 2003 when I would do maybe 5 cartoons a year. It wasn't something that was like, oh, I'm a cartoonist and this is what I'm going to be doing constantly. I fell into it because I despise the profession. Largely, in the United States, so much of the political and editorial cartooning is, arguing the integrity of your own political party by attacking the other one. And I saw that as just a ridiculous. It's like sports. It was like, I am arguing in defense of my team. So I got into it just because I was reprehensible. I really despised that technique. And so by the time it's 2003, I'm the stay-at-home parent. My wife is a teacher. And she said, do me a favor and focus on one of the things that you like to do to try to increase the income while you're at home. So that's when I started to do lots of cartoons, and I was immediately successful at it. And anybody who knows political cartooning and cartooning in general, it doesn't pay a whole lot. So there were some scenarios then, working for the Village Voice and so forth, where the advertising agency that the Voice used recognized my abilities and wanted to use them to help advertise the newspaper. So I was like, okay, I can sort of see where that is a viable thing. So I did a little bit of that. And then some other ad agencies saw, wow, his stuff could actually help sell Red Bull. So very early on, anybody who knows advertising too, it's ridiculous. For every storyboard I did for the Red Bull people, it's an easy $1,000. And, for me, about an hour and a half of work. So I did that for about a month and made a ton of money, which was great to throw into the bank, because as I said, I had these brand new babies. But that was on the understanding that they would not use my name, and it was nothing that I felt terribly good about. And it taught me the lesson of just like, because this makes me feel a little sick, and because I'm enabling something like, Red Bull and meeting a lot of those people, just it's sort of a disgusting group of people, really reminded me what I was in the profession for, which was actually to avoid this existential nausea that comes out of having your abilities co-opted or allowing them to be co-opted by these larger entities that are only interested in profit. And the last experience that I had, and what really hit home was, again, I'm home, I've got the kids, I get a call from this ad agency that wanted me to do a 30-second animation for a client that they said was going to be advertising during the Super Bowl. And I'm like, oh, that sounds great. They wanted it to be like black and white, wiggly line animation that I could do very, very quickly. They love the style. So I didn't know what to ask for. I'm not really in that world, but they said, okay, well, we'll ask for $60,000 for your 30-second spot. And I'm like, holy heck, And then I asked the question, well, who is this client for? And they said, well, you don't need to know that. And I said, well, I'm going to know, aren't I, when I do the animation? They said, no, it's an animation. It's, their name's going to be at the end, but it's really just a joke and you're going to be able to just do it fine. I said, well, now I really need to know who this is. And they said, well, the truth of the matter is, if we tell you who it is, there's no way you would do it. And I said, well, then I can't do it, And so it died. And it was just this, and it made me feel, to be able to walk away from that and feel like I had the integrity of my soul was allowed to remain intact and that I didn't sell myself was a great feeling. My wife would have a different interpretation of what that scenario was. And there's penalties for that. There's penalties for wanting to maintain that integrity. Because the truth of the matter, in the United States, since you have the eradication of the middle class, the arts community is less and less able to just have a shitty part-time job and then dedicate, his or her own time towards artistic expression. It just doesn't happen anymore. And that's deliberate. More and more, the artistic voice is not being invited into political conversation in this country. And if you can get that, which is connected to the question you asked just a little bit ago.